everyone, and welcome once again to the Trans Atheist channel. Firstly, a shout out to my subscribers. Thank you for all of your support, it really does mean the world to me. And if you're newly tuning in, please like, share and subscribe. And I hope to continue providing you all with the content that you've subscribed for. So today I want to rebuttal another morning worship video. And this one is the one that is linked to in the weekly study programme of Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's the one for this week. It's based on idolatry, and it is presented by Harold Corkern. There's not too much to rebuttal in this one, just a few points that I want to make, and a couple of areas where I want to point out once again manipulation within this organisation. But before we start, I want to talk about a few plans that I have for my channel. As you know, my tag is Trans Atheist. Up until this point, I've only spoke on the religious side of that. But the trans refers to me being transgendered. So I want to also talk about LGBT issues. That's why I will be presenting some live streams in the near future, discussing issues relating to the LGBT community. I understand if not all of you want to watch those live streams, and that is fine if you just want to watch the XJW content and that's all you're interested in. But I hope the content will be interesting to at least some of you, and I am looking for volunteers to appear on one of those live streams, the topic being LGBT issues within religion. So if anyone has experience of that and wants to appear, please message me and I will arrange that. Thank you. So now let's get on with the rebuttal on the idolatry morning worship video. This video is linked to in the Watchtower study article, which is split into two parts. So first I'm going to look at those parts. First topic is flee from idolatry. It's a very short article, so I will read it before getting into the video. So it says in the article, in the only paragraph, the Israelites' view of idol worship had apparently been influenced by Egyptian thinking. Today, idolatry can take many forms, some of which could be hard to recognise. Although we might not turn to outright idol worship, we could become idolaters by allowing selfish desires to distract us from worshipping Jehovah whole-souled. And then after the pictures, the caption for those pictures: what aspects of daily life could distract me from worshipping Jehovah, and how can I keep them from controlling me? So what I want to make a point on is how Watchtower here are defining idolatry. Obviously, it's not like in ancient times when people actually made idols and bowed down to them. But what they are saying is that simple everyday life, like shopping, watching television, and playing games, can also be classed as idolatry. And in the caption there it mentions, how can I keep them from controlling me? This is very interesting because once again we see the mentality of cult manipulation. With Jehovah's Witnesses, it is always about who or what is controlling you. It's very different for the rest of us though. We would ask, am I allowing myself to get too enthralled in a particular activity, and then simply do that activity less if there's something else that we want to or need to be doing? But for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's about, is this activity a temptation from Satan? And does it mean that Satan is controlling me and not Jehovah controlling me? It's always about control. Then we have the second section of this Watchtower article, which is entitled Cherish Your Relationship with Jehovah. And there's one paragraph at the end of this that I want to read out. And that's the bit that I've highlighted here on the screen. So it says in that bit, we might ask ourselves, how do I respond when confronted with temptation? Do my actions show that I cherish my relationship with Jehovah? Now this is the important bit. Deep love for our Heavenly Father will help us to flee from things that He hates. So again, we can see here how for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's never an inward thought, like, how do I feel about this activity? Or how do I enjoy this activity? or how does this activity affect me? On the contrary, it's always how does God feel about this? Does God like this activity? How do I do what makes God happy? And that is not a healthy way to live. Never being able to think about what you like or what makes you happy, but always having to think about what makes the other person happy. That is not serving somebody. That is being a slave to somebody. So now, after looking at those articles, let's watch the first clip.
When Paul wrote the letter to the Colossians, it was in the year 60 to 61 CE, just similar to the time that he wrote Ephesians that we talked about yesterday. And he wrote for similar reasons, to protect his brothers from the immoral environment that was around them and to encourage them to fight against the weaknesses of the flesh. So let's open our Bibles to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll read in its entirety verse 5. Colossians 3:5. Deaden therefore your body members that are on the earth as respects sexual immorality, uncleanness, uncontrolled sexual passion, hurtful desire, and greediness, which is idolatry. And we've been told that these expressions convey the idea of totally wiping out these desires. When we sense them coming up in our heart and mind, we slay them, we wipe them out. And it's very important because to fail to do that puts us into all sorts of difficulties with Jehovah, with others, and causes problems for ourselves. Look at verse 6. On account of those things, the wrath of God is coming. So it affects our everlasting future as well, doesn't it? One thing that is highlighted here is how serious these desires can become. They get bound up with greediness, covetousness, which is idolatry. And covetousness has been described as something that is insatiable. It's always after for something that should not have or does not have the right to have. It's ruthless self-seeking, it has been defined as. And a covetous person or a greedy person makes the object of his desire so strong that in essence it can become his God.
Well, at this point, I think it's time that we go over to my dictionary corner once again, as he makes the point here that idolatry means greediness and covetousness. After reading that verse, and I think this is another example of Watchtower slightly changing the meaning of a word to suit their own needs. So let's have a look at what the dictionary definition for idolatry is. So the definition is the worship of idols, and then also extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. And similar words relating to idolatry would be idolizing, worship, worshipping, adulation, adoration, adoring, reverence, glorification, lionizing, love, admiration, loving, admiring, and hero worshipping. So, as a thought, no mention of greed or coveting, which are different concepts. And granted, idolatry could be tied in with these attributes, but to say that they are the meaning of idolatry is slightly misleading. So another example of misleading terminology used by Watchtower to enforce an outdated concept for their own ends. And as I have mentioned in previous videos, the more words that they do this with, the more they change a language in the minds of their followers, to the point where the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses are actually thinking in a complete and utter different language than everybody else around them in the world. And this is dangerous, as that then enforces the alienation of these cult members from the rest of society.
And that reminds us of the inspired words of Philippians 3:18 and 19, where Paul used a similar expression about those who used to be with him in the truth but no longer were, and he was very sad about that. And what happened to them? Well, their God became their belly. and their desires overwhelmed even their love for Jehovah. And it was back in 1978 that the Watchtower in the April 1st issue said this about this quality of greed and covetousness and idolatry. And it said this: if we become aware of a wrong desire building up within ourselves, we do well to call to mind how precious our relationship with God is and how senseless it would be to forfeit this by making oneself an idolater. So that's a very serious thought, isn't it? That a person could actually start worshiping something other than Jehovah.
So again, the true reason why Watchtower does anything or says anything is seen here. They demand 100% worship and adoration and obedience from their members. They're trying to scare the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses that even slightly deviating from the script of life provided by Watchtower could and will lead them not to be controlled by Jehovah or by the organisation, but being controlled by desire, thus Satan. A very black and white way of thinking. Just like every aspect of the beliefs of this religion, life is black and white. You have to worship something, and that something should be God, i.e. the organisation, or you will be worshipping Satan. There is no other option. As a human, you are just a slave. You were made to worship, and everyone who is not a Jehovah's Witness is worshipping Satan. They must be lying if they say that they're just living and doing things for themselves, things that make them happy. That's a very black and white way of thinking. But in reality, life is not like that. Life is not just black and white. It is grey. You have to make decisions based on many different aspects. Like, what do I enjoy? How does what I enjoy affect others? And can I make myself happy whilst also helping others to also be happy?
And that was a very serious sin even in ancient Israel, wasn't it? This matter of idolatry. It carried the death penalty. But another aspect of the Ten Commandments that carried the death penalty was adultery. So what is the similarity between idolatry and the death penalty and adultery and the death penalty? Well, worshiping an idol, a person would break his covenant with Jehovah. And committing adultery, he would break his covenant with his spouse. So why would Jehovah feel so strongly about that? Well, let's open our Bibles to Psalm 33, and we'll look at the kind of person Jehovah is when it comes to his word and what he says. Psalm 33, let's read verse 4. For the word of Jehovah is upright, and everything he does is trustworthy. And then look at verse 9. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. So the psalmist is saying when Jehovah says something, he means it. And so when a person says to Jehovah, I'm going to worship you exclusively, and he doesn't, it's treachery. It's unlike God, Jehovah. It's like the devil, who is the liar and untrustworthy. So it adds weight, doesn't it, to our desire never to fall victim to idolatry in any form.
So I'm going to sidetrack a little here, because that's mainly the end of this part on idolatry. He's going to start talking about marriage next. But I'm happy that he mentions here the Ten Commandments in this particular context, because that brings me on to a point that I wanted to make. He says in the scripture there that every action Jehovah makes is just, and every word he speaks is right. But let's think about the Ten Commandments for a second, and how they are worded. Actually, I'll quickly read them from the verses in the Bible. That's Exodus 20, verse 3 through 17. It says there, you must not have any other gods beside me. You must not make for yourself a carved image or a form, like anything that is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You must not bow down to them, nor be enticed to serve them. For I, Jehovah your God, am a God who requires exclusive devotion, bringing punishment for the error of fathers upon sons, upon the 3rd generation, and upon the 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing loyal love to the 1000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You must not take up the name of Jehovah your God in a worthless way, for Jehovah will not leave unpunished the one who takes up his name in a worthless way. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it sacred. You are not to labour and do all of your work for 6 days. You are to labour and do all of your work for 6 days, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to Jehovah your God. You must not do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your slave man, nor your slave girl. Honour your father and your mother, so that you may live a long time in the land of Jehovah your God. You must not murder, you must not commit adultery, you must not steal, you must not testify falsely when you are a witness against your fellow man. You must not desire your fellow man's house. You must not desire your fellow man's wife, nor his slave man, nor his slave girl, nor his bull, nor his donkey. So what strikes me from these verses, firstly, is the order that is given to the commands, and the quantity given to different commands. For a God of love, justness, and righteousness, is it not strange that there's 3 laws relating to the worship of him, and how to and how not to worship him, but only 1 law for more serious things, for instance, murder, and then things like child abuse, not even mentioned. In fact, murder is like 6th in the list of things not to do. Not working on God's day is above that, and honour your parents makes the list, but as I said, abusing your children does not even make the cut. Then things like slavery are clearly condoned here. So how are we to follow what this awful God says we must do? He hasn't even got his priorities straight. In fact, the majority of us worldly, non-Jehovah's Witnesses have better morals than the God of love and justice in the Bible. As I've said many times, the Bible is not a nice place to be, and clearly is not written by some divine non-human who knows everything. It's written by humans 2,000 years ago, when morals were more like what we read here. Anyway, that's enough of the sidetracking. Let's see what Harold has to say about marriage.
Our comments in the Watchtower that we'll read a little bit later today in the actual printed comment does focus on this matter of marriage and adultery and avoiding that, of course. And what we'd like to do now is just take a few moments and highlight some dangers that could come up for married people and see how that applies to deadening or slaying those desires right from the very beginning so that they do not flourish and cause a problem. One of the principles that we can think about is Proverbs 22:3. We see the danger and we turn aside. So what are some things that we could see as a danger, identify them, and slay them before they become a problem? Well, obviously, what we look at, listen to, and read fills our mind with either good or bad. So we avoid intake of bad things. It only fuels bad desires. But research has shown, and our publications have often commented on, that when a person gets involved in adultery, it isn't always just a sexual greed or the sexual desire that motivates him to go down that path in the first place. or her to go down that path the first time. Well, what is it? Well, what is the fundamental function of marriage? It has often been said that the fundamental function of marriage is receiving and giving emotional support. It's a relationship where a person feels loved, appreciated, wanted, and needed in a very special way. And when a person begins to feel that that is missing, then they begin looking for someone who can give them that, not necessarily right away sexual gratification. And that's why the Watchtower, or really the Awake of January 8th, 86 Awake, said this: being a good listener has the capacity for making the other person feel that he is especially valued and what he is saying is of concern and significance to him. So it's this relationship that needs to be guarded, the friendship. And the 1994 Watchtower, the July 15th, added weight to this comment when it quoted a divorce attorney, of all people, and he said, what is the single biggest reason couples break up? And this is what he said. It was quoted in the magazine. The inability to talk honestly with each other, bare their souls, and treat each other as their best friend. That's the main reason. That can often lead to other physical contact, but it often is not the one that gets it started. So now, what can we do to avoid that? Well, we want to treasure our relationships. And it reminds us of an experience that was given in the August 15th, 2012 Watchtower about an elder, also a pioneer, named Daniel, and his wife, pioneering. But he was very involved in the congregation, always took on assignments. He had 3 Bible students, men, who got baptized, but they needed a lot of help. They were newly baptized. He was busy with other assignments. His wife spent a lot of time with these newly baptized brothers. He was neglecting his wife. She bonded emotionally with one of these brothers. Adultery was committed. But Daniel said he bore a heavy responsibility in that respect. In fact, at the end of the lessons learned, he said this: there is much more to life than struggling to care for privileges to the detriment of your own family. So the need for balance. Pursuing kingdom interests, of course, and an understanding wife or a husband can understand and support that. But there is a balance, and if it oversteps itself, then real problems can result. So we want to do all we can to slay desires when we sense them in ourselves, and it's going to take earnest effort. It's going to take endurance, because as long as we're in this imperfect state, no one can say, I am immune to any of those desires that could crop up at different times. So our love for Jehovah, our love for our mates, our love for our brothers prevent us from going down the path of greediness and idolatry, which only results.
So I'm not married myself, being asexual and all, so I cannot comment too much here, so I'll be skirting around a lot of this. But before I get on to that, at the beginning of this clip, Harold mentions about slaying certain attributes and feelings that are wrong and can cause problems. Again, this is another one of those black and white situations. You either have the emotion or feeling and let it control you, or you slay it, you kill it, you rip it out. I've been to many different therapists and psychologists over the course of my life since leaving Jehovah's Witnesses, and never have any of them said to me, that's a bad emotion you have there. If you feel like that, what you need to do is you need to take that emotion or feeling and kill it, slay it, utterly destroy it. This is a very weird way for anyone to talk about feelings, thoughts and emotions. And when you think about it, it's also very damaging for a person's psyche to be thinking like this for an extended period of time. And this is one of the reasons why many Jehovah's Witnesses, like myself, waking up from this cult, have a very hard time dealing with emotion in a calm and healthy way. Because instead of learning to deal with the emotion, to live with the emotion in a way that promotes healthy mindfulness, they are instead trying to rip that emotion out. They're in many ways battling themselves until it brings them to a very unhealthy place. So back to marriage. I only really have 1 or 2 points here. And as I said, I'm not married myself and never intend to be. So please don't judge me for what I'm about to say on this topic. I will never be a good voice for this topic. But as for Jehovah's Witnesses and their views on marriage and making happy marriages within Jehovah's Witnesses, wouldn't that be easier to accomplish if, as a man or a woman, you were encouraged to pick a mate that you feel comfortable with, that you like and love, that you feel you have many things in common with, and that you'll be able to spend the rest of your life with them, instead of being pushed to pick somebody to marry based solely on their spirituality, on their standing in a religious congregation, based upon their love, not for you, but their love for a non-existent entity. Maybe I'm wrong with this, but it's just a thought. And also, not forcing people who have realised they picked the wrong person that they cannot spend the rest of their lives with happily, forcing them to remain in a loveless marriage, or forcing an abused partner to remain in an abusive relationship. It strikes me that a better option for gaining the maximum number of happy marriages would be to allow divorce. Allow people to find happiness instead of battling to create happiness where there is none. Anyway, this was my thoughts on the morning worship video. I know I've waffled on a bit, but I hope I've made some good points, and hope you have enjoyed what I've had to say. I do enjoy covering these videos myself, and I do try my best to make valid criticisms. And I know sometimes to certain people watching, it might seem like I'm just having a dig at Jehovah's Witnesses. But my aim is to point out manipulation within this group, to hopefully help those who are waking up, or have been out for years, as I know how hard it can be. And also, I love people who are still trapped inside this organisation, and would love nothing more than to help those who are trapped to find that open door, that door that will lead them to freedom. Freedom to make their own decisions of what will make them happy, instead of being an emotional and intellectual slave to a group of narcissistic men in America. So thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And as always, remember, ignorance is never bliss.